In this video, you will learn how to analyze different Amazon PPC reports and which of them are the most important ones that every seller must regularly download and analyze in order to run their business properly. Our guest today is Ritu Java from PPC Ninja. It's a software to automate your PPC campaigns, and you can find the link below to PPC Ninja and to their special offer as well. And this video is hosted by LISETT LEES. She works with different Amazon brands. And as always, if you like the video, click the like button below and subscribe to our channel.
Hello Ritu, it's really nice to have you here today to talk about Amazon advertising. But first things first, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi Lisa. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Ritu Java, and I am the co-founder and CEO of PPC Ninja. We are a North American company offering software, services, and PPC training. So that's a short background, and I'll get into a little bit more detail a little bit later.
Very good. So today we will talk about Amazon advertising reports. So Ritu, what do you think? Are Amazon sellers rather good with handling different reports, or do they usually need help with understanding the data and analyzing it?
Yeah. So I think there's so many reports. It's often easy to get lost in and get overwhelmed by all that information and data that Amazon kind of throws at us. I think we will be talking about 3 new advertising reports that have just come out, and maybe I'll try to give everybody an overview of what the different types of reports are so that they can jump into the right place and start using this data, because it is extremely valuable and useful. And especially if you want to go to the next level in terms of your advertising, it's so important to have a finger on the pulse and know exactly what's going on in your PPC account.
Okay, so we're now all ready to see your presentation, so please share your screen.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about 3 new advertising reports that we've just started getting access to. Not all the accounts have it, but because it's being rolled out, we know how Amazon works. Soon you will all have access to these 3 reports. So before I jump into the reports, a little bit of a background of myself. So basically, I am from India. I was born in India a very long time ago. And then I moved to Japan. I lived there for 17 years. And that's actually where my e-commerce journey began. And I started, selling on Etsy, which was my first online marketplace. I used to design jewelry, and very quickly I realized that you don't really get traction and visibility just because you have a good product. You have to do so many things to make it visible. You have to, teach yourself a bunch of stuff. So that's what I did. I taught myself all about marketing, even though my background is in engineering and I was working for a software company before I started this. But I really had to teach myself how to do blogging and product photography, marketing, Facebook ads, Google ads, everything. And so that's when I decided to go back to school and get a little bit of a formal education in data science, because I was so interested in the topic. So I went to the United States and studied there for a year and was very fortunate right after that to be absorbed in this large Amazon, in this company. It's an Amazon seller, 8-figure Amazon seller. And that's where I really fell in love with Amazon advertising and haven't looked back since. So now fast forward to today, I live in Canada. I have been the CEO and co-founder of PPC Ninja, and it's a lot of fun. So that's a little bit of my background. So now let's jump into the topic, and I'm going to start showing you where you can find these advertising reports, and then we'll dive in. So when you're in your campaign manager on Seller Central, if you hover over the left blue bar, you can see this section called reports, and this is where all the magic is. Like, this is all the reports and all the data that you can access. So you click on this, and then you have a page that looks something like this. And there's reports for all these 4 different ad types. So there's sponsored product, sponsored brand video, and then sponsored display. And each of these further have more like reports under them. Obviously, sponsored products being around for the longest period of time has the most reports, and it's also the most sophisticated in their reporting. So you can see here there's a bunch of reports that you can get for sponsored products alone. You can also set your time, duration, and the reporting period. And that's how you can get as granular as you like and analyze your data. So let's look at all the different types of reports. Essentially, I've just opened those four out into these four, 1, 2, 3, 4 types. And then I'm showing you all the different reports that are available under them. There's a total of 24 types at this point, and they're all advertising data. So it's really looking at your basic data through many different views and many different perspectives, and each of them has their own kind of purpose. We have a blog post on our PPC Ninja blog that talks about advertising reports, and you can get more information about that. And today we'll just limit to 3 important recent ones that have come out. I think most people are familiar with the search term report because that's where they can extract buyer searches that matched to the keywords that they are bidding on, or to the auto campaigns or the category campaigns that they are bidding on, right? So that information is extremely valuable, and I know that a lot of people use that pretty frequently, pretty regularly. So that's really nice to have. But there's also these other types that give you different information, like targeting gives you information similar to search terms, but it doesn't give you buyer searches. It gives you information for each of your targets. So you can look at your data, just all the data like impressions, clicks, spend, sales, ACoS, etc. You can see that for every target on Amazon. You can also look at which products were advertised, how they did, and also which products were purchased. So there's a difference here: advertised product, purchased product. These two reports are kind of complementary because they tell you what were the advertised products and how they did, and how what actually got purchased and how did they do. You also have this thing called placement report, which gives you a breakdown of which placements did you perform best under. So for example, the top of search placement, product pages, rest of search, and off Amazon. So you get 4 different placements. Not everyone has the off Amazon component, but those who do will be able to see that data. So that's really interesting because then this can guide you to place the right kind of placement modifiers. So that's really interesting and important. And then you have a few others like search term impression share, budget, and so on. So today I'm going to actually talk about the budget report, the search term impression share report, and then this new report under sponsored brands called category benchmark. So those are the 3 absolute new ones that have come out. You can almost see some of them are beta, some of them marked as new. So we'll get into that. Just to know the time range, these reports do expire, meaning that you can't go back beyond a certain limit. Like you can't always have that data fresh. So let's say if today you want to see what data you got like 4 months ago, you won't be able to get it. So most people, what they do is they download these reports monthly so that they can get data for the past 60 days, and that's how they can keep track of this information over time. Or you can use a software. For example, even our software provides this on a continuous basis, which means you don't need to download anything, you don't need to store or compile, etc. All of that information gets downloaded daily. The search term reports get downloaded daily for as long as you're using the software. You can have that access. So most of these reports are between 60 to 90 days back. So the look back window is 60 to 90 days. So just something to keep in mind. So let's talk about the search term report, which is the most popular report, before I get into the 3 new ones, and how people can typically use this kind of report. So you can use the search term report to discover new keywords, right? You can use it for, you can set some filters and say, okay, all of the keywords that gave me at least 2 orders and had a good target or had a good ACoS, which is below the target ACoS. Those could be used to discover new keywords, or you could have discovery of new targets even. So like ASINs, right? So anything that begins with a B0, that's a ASIN target. You can discover that from your search term report. You can also discover listing issues. For example, if you have lots and lots of clicks, I've just given an example of 15. It could be any number you pick. You have lots and lots of clicks and no sales, so there's no conversions happening. That typically indicates problems on your listing, because there might be something you want to fix there, or you might discover that the keyword is not even present on your listing, things like that. You can also discover potential negative keywords by just measuring how many clicks happened without any sales. You might get a good idea of, okay, these keywords are not working for me. You want to check for relevancy. If it's irrelevant, you can block it off, or if it is relevant, then you can find out why it is not converting. Is the conversion rate too low? Is there some other problem maybe on my listing in terms of price point, or let's say you have a negative review that's deterring people to continue with their purchase, and so on. So yeah, a few different meaningful insights from the search term report. So now let's get into the 3 new advertising reports that I mentioned earlier. So the first one is the budget report, and it is very interesting. It gives you information by campaign. So for all of your campaigns here, it tells you all this detail. So you have the budget that you have placed on each of these campaigns. Then it tells you a recommended budget, right? How much you should be budgeting for this campaign. Then it tells you what was your average time within budget. So average time in budget just means that what percentage of the time were you within budget? So which means the rest of the time you ran out of budget, right? That's the thing that most people get anxious about, because they're running out of budget, or their budget finishes pretty early in the day, and so on. So this percentage tells you what percentage of the time you were in budget. So that's interesting. Then there's 2 interesting other ones as well. Estimated missed clicks. Because you were not in budget, you missed between 475 clicks to 1,590 clicks. So this information tells us what you might have gotten had you been within budget, right? Now, there's a lot of reasons why people want to limit their budget. Sometimes it is because the campaign is just not performing. It is extremely high ACoS, and you're trying to cap it at the budget level. I typically like to use budget capping only for very specific reasons. Like, let's say I am if I cap the budget, I'm going to also do a second step of going inside under the hood to see which of those keywords or targets was making me lose the most money. Can I make some bid adjustments? Can I optimize my bids further there or not? The other reason why I like to cap budgets is, when I'm running some sort of ranking campaign, where in my ranking, I'm bidding extremely high. So I want to make sure that every time I do show up on page 1, it is at the top of the page. So I put a very high multiplier on the top of search modifier. And I also start with a pretty high base bid, but that means that I'm going to spend a lot of money. I'm going to be, using a lot of my overall budget for just ranking a few keywords. And in those cases, I do like to cap my budget so that I don't, prevent all the other campaigns from getting enough of my daily budget. But in other cases where the ACoS is good, I generally don't cap my budgets. I leave them as high as possible, because I use that opportunity to generate more sales. I use that as an investment for a good return. So anyway, this report is pretty insightful. You can also look at all the other information like impressions and clicks that you got for that campaign, including your ACoS and all that stuff. So it's really an interesting, and I really appreciate this report. And this is by campaign. Let's look at the next report. This is the search term impression share report. And what it is that for your search terms, How much of the impression share did you get? It's essentially that, right? So by search term on Amazon, what percentage of those searches actually went to your products? So that's basically what it is. And the way it manifests inside the report is that it gives you a numeric rank of your account-wide impression share relative to other advertisers. So I'll just give you an example, and this will be clear. The second thing it gives you is the percentage of your share of the total impressions for the search term. So what percentage of all of those impressions went to you, for that keyword or that search term. So this is what it looks like. So here it is, like I said, this report is by search term, right? And so here are the customer search terms. So these are the search terms. And here is the search term impression rank. And here is the search term impression share. So this is, of course, a percentage. So 46% of the impressions for that keyword went to this, went to this account, right? Like in this category. And what does that mean in terms of the ranking of that impression share? So here it says 2, which means we're at number 2 of all of the competitors that have some slice of the impression pie. So there's obviously one brand above us that has more impressions than us, right? So we're at 46, they probably have more than 46. And that's how you kind of tell how big the pie is, so you can almost reverse engineer the size of the pie relative to what you've got and get an idea of like what is your strength for certain search terms. So I think this is a really important report. It is available for both sponsored products and sponsored brands at this point. And so you can see for those ads, like how you are actually owning the market, or in other words, you can find out your share of voice. That's another way of looking at. Some people like to measure it by share of voice. So extremely useful and valuable information. Then the third report that I want to highlight is the category benchmark report. And this category benchmark report is by category. So this basically tells you for all of the categories that you are in or are advertising in, what is your performance in those categories, right? So it'll give you category performance for impressions, for click-through rate, for ACOS, and then ROAS. ROAS is just the inverse of ACOS. So for all practical purposes, it's 3 data points that they give us information about. And in addition, it also tells you how your peers performed in that category and how you stack up against them, right? So that's really valuable information to see, because a lot of times we can tell how we're doing in terms of, okay, we have a certain bid, we have a certain CPC, we have a certain ACOS, but we don't know what others are, how they are doing, right? So this information gives you insight into how your competitors are actually performing. So let's look at the report. So here in this report, you have like I've just given some dummy names here, but there's like 4 different categories that were mentioned here. So category 1, 2, 3, 4. And within this category, I'm just right now I'm just looking at my advertising cost of sales. So my ACOS in this category, how am I doing? So the one in green is for my brand, and these are my peers. So they've basically given you 3 segments or three sections of like this almost bell curve. The top 25%, the the median, so that's the middle 50%, this portion, and then the bottom 25% of your peers. So within the peers, you can see how the lowest, the lowest peer here, they had an ACOS of 13.36% in this category, whereas mine is 12.33%, right? This is my ACOS, average ACOS in my category, and they had this. So that's really useful, right? Because then I know how they might be spending money, and maybe I'm in a better position, and so I'm stronger, and so I can maybe be a little bit more aggressive because I have more relevancy. So this information is actually pretty valuable, it becomes really stark when you look at example 4 here. I have 7.71 ACOS for this category. The top section has 5.82, and I'm here somewhere in the middle. And then the bottom section has a very high ACOS. So they're spending a lot of money in this category, and they're probably bleeding. They won't be able to sustain it for very long. So this gives me an edge, right? Because I'm kind of here and I can optimize a little bit and do pretty well. So yeah, so that's how you basically look at how you can you stack up against all these other competitors and use that information to see which categories you have strength in, which categories you probably don't, and then this whole set can be repeated. Like this report is pretty long horizontally, so you can see the same information for all of these values. So you can see it for impressions, how your impressions are doing, others are doing, CTR, ACOS, ROAS, all 4 of them can be viewed like this. Now we have a pretty in-depth article on this on our blog. If you are interested, it's called Deep Dive into Amazon's Category Benchmark Report. So you can look at that and get more information if you're interested. But yeah, so basically that's what I wanted to share today, just these 3 new hot off the press reports. Yeah, happy to pause at this point and in case there's any questions or any comments that you might have, Lisette.
Thank you so much. Actually, I do have some questions. So first of all, I'm interested to know why the look-back window is so short. I think you mentioned for the most reports, it's usually around 60 to 90 days. So why doesn't Amazon give us more data?
That's a great question. I wish I knew the answer. I don't. It's probably for architectural reasons, right? They probably compact their their past reports and convert them into aggregates rather than have them available as granularly as daily. So I think it's just expense on and it's an overhead on architecture to have access to so much data that can be queried at any time. So it's more like a technical thing than anything else, in my opinion. But with software, that problem is solved, right? Software like PPC Ninja will keep your data forever, but Amazon's servers would be probably burdened if they had to do that for so many, millions of sellers.
Very good. So about working with reports, I know a lot of sellers haven't been working with Excel sheets before. So do you have any general tips how to analyze the data and sort it in the Excel sheet? Perhaps you have some ideas what are the best resources to learn more how to do it better.
You're right. It is very hard, for people to wrap their heads around these reports. But I would say, start from the very basics. Of course, the search term report is an important one. And then you will probably need a few Excel tricks. And I think those are mostly in cleaning up the report and seeing what makes sense and so on. So you'll probably need to learn things like filters, like that's a basic thing that you'll need to learn, how to set filters on your columns. You will need to learn some formulas like duplicates or ways to dedupe your data so that you can get a clean list extraction from a CSV file. And then there's some formulas like VLOOKUP, which is good to compare how a section that you've extracted from a search term report, you want to match that to what you already have in terms of what keyword you're already advertising on, so that you can compare them and see which ones are new, which ones are already existed, things like that. So I think there's a lot of courses to learn about Excel, and I would just focus on those couple of ones: filtering, extracting unique values, and comparing 2 or 3 lists against each other. You can also use software, and of course, like I would just like to say, PPC Ninja does help a lot in that sense, because you don't really need to know Excel. It does pretty much all the functions of Excel that you would typically need to extract this kind of information from your search term report. And then you don't even need to download it at all. So definitely lean on software if you can afford it, if you can get access to it. That would be a good way to go about it.
Good. I think now it's a good time to ask you to explain more in depth how PPC Ninja helps Amazon sellers, and also let us know what is the best way to reach you to learn more about your services.
So you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm very active there, and that's my handle. I'm also partially active on Twitter, but mostly on LinkedIn. So I post a lot of content there. I also, write for our blog on the PPC Ninja blog. So you can look up ppcninja.com. In addition, just to give you a quick intro to our software. So our software is great for agencies as well as individual sellers. It can be used to analyze your data in many different ways. So we provided a lot of filters, double filters, and a lot of bulk operations to slice and dice your data different ways, and then apply bulk filters for across all the campaigns, all the keywords, and so on. We also provide daily bid recommendations, keyword harvesting recommendations, and so on. And at this point, we're offering a 4-week mastermind to go along with, so anyone who signs up for the 4-week mastermind program also gets access to PPC Ninja for free for 4 weeks. And these are conducted live. We have 2 sessions running in a day so that we can cover the globe. And at this point, we've done about 22 mastermind programs with sellers from all over the world joining and learning about PPC concepts and so on. So yeah, I'd love to invite your audience to sign up for this. If they have any experience with advertising on Amazon, we only require that you have done some advertising. And if you have, then you're free to join.
Sounds very good. So all the viewers, you can go to that link and sign up. So thanks again for joining me today to share your knowledge, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much, Ritu. It was enjoyable. Really loved it. Thank you.
I hope this video helped you to understand better how to analyze important Amazon PPC reports. And again, if you want to try PPC Ninja software for automating your PPC campaigns, find a special 20% off deal in the video description, as well as a link where you can sign up. And now I would like to invite you to watch more videos about Amazon advertising. It's a whole playlist, and you can learn much more and a lot of other things, how to run Amazon ads for your products.